Jesse Marsch, on a couple of occasions, referenced the Four Nations face-off, the ice hockey tournament that captured a lot of hearts and minds of sports fans in Canada and the USA, of course, through the political tension right now with some of the quotes and quips and threats from the commander-in-chief south of the border and the Canadian response to it. So Jesse Marsch said with that in mind, he expects the next time Canada and the US play, there's going to be more intensity like we saw in those matches. Now, we understand very well, and we shouldn't forget that you can't put the cart before the horse. Canada needs to beat Mexico, which is no small feat, before setting up a potential to play the Americans. But if that comes, Gareth, do you think there is the potential to have a replication of what the Four Nations face-off did and bring in some of the masses and say, Canada, USA, it's spicy, a trophy's on the line, and it will be an intense battle like we haven't seen probably since Canada, USA in Hamilton?
I'm not there yet. Like, look, at the Nations League, it's funny having this conversation about Canada versus the United States. They might not even play over the course of the two games. Canada's first game, let's remind everyone, is against Mexico. And there's no guarantee if they make it to the final. Panama's a good team. They beat the United States at last summer's Copa America as well. Like, look, we called Jesse Marsch the spokesperson for the Canadian men's national team. He's also the hype man. He's like the Flava Flav right now as well. And he knows what buttons to push. I don't think that this kind of makes its way down to the players as much as it's being made out. I think that this is a sales job to get people engaged. Like, ooh, bring it on, Canada, US, let's go. And people want to see that based upon the current climate. I get that. But Mexico are a very good team. You need to beat them in LA. It's going to be a pro-Mexican crowd. Like, there's work to be done here. And the focus for this team needs to be about improvement on the field. Despite good results and some good performances, there is still room for improvement amongst this group between now and the Nations League, between now and the World Cup in 2026. They need to figure out how to be the best version of themselves. The brotherhood, the nationalism, like this comes straight out of the John Herdman playbook. That's why I think for Marsch, this is more for the rest of this country to get engaged, because it matters for the interest, it matters for the dollars and cents. So I think that this means a little bit more off the field, Adam, than it does on the field. And what would be incredibly disappointing if Canada doesn't get past Mexico and all of this hype is for naught. So it's actually kind of putting more pressure on them in an indirect way, because if they're unable to deliver that game against the United States, it's going to, okay. Like, Mexico's first, beat Mexico, then we'll worry about that when it comes and if it comes.
Touche. Oliver.
I don't know. I think the fact that the US game isn't guaranteed, like, does it even matter? The possibility is there. Like, this is the thing, is that I think if you sell this tournament that way, and I think it does apply to the players as well as to the supporters, like, more people are going to be interested in the semi-final because it could set up Canada against the US in the final, than if you just told them, hey, Canada's playing Mexico in a semi-final. Like, the storyline, I think, still kind of infiltrates that first game, even though the US have nothing to do with it, and even though there's no guarantee that the US will even get past Panama and be waiting in the final. Like, I still think that he said it himself, right? Like, when talking about the Four Nations, that he thought that in the first game that the US won, that they had a fire lit under them by the booing of their national anthem. I think that's what he's trying to create in his players. He's trying to give them that extra bit of motivation, galvanize them that little bit more than maybe just the football does, by making this, into that Canada-USA rivalry. And I think the chance to secure that match by beating Mexico, like, all of the things he's saying still applies to that semifinal to me as much as it does to the actual game that could happen against the US.
But you said it. It's about selling the hope. It's not as if the game.
I think it can be all of the above.
Those are different things for me. I'm not knocking him, by the way. I actually like the tactic. I understand it, but I think we're just getting ahead of ourselves here.
It can all be true, though, right? Like, I think they are his genuinely held beliefs. I thought he was authentic when he was talking about that stuff and passionate about it. But I think it can also motivate the players. It can also motivate the country. It can be a great storyline for media to latch onto. Like, all of it can be true.
Yeah, but he he knows what he's saying. Like, he's saying this for a reason. He's an intelligent guy. It's not some guy that's rolling off the cuff. And for me, it's one of the big opportunities to play in a competition for a trophy in games that matter between now and the World Cup. Like the friendly, like Adam and I are thrilled that Canada are going to play Wales, like a place that we both have lineage. Like, that's great, but selling that game is completely different than selling a potential matchup with the United States in this climate, right? Like, we understand why he's doing it, but his job and his focus is improving the team on the field. And I still think, like, from an execution perspective, there is lots of work to do with this group. There's nothing to do with the we're Canada. Like, it goes beyond that, because that will take you so far. But for the country and the interest and try to make something off it out of the field and building momentum ahead of 2026, it absolutely does matter. I totally get it from that vantage point.
But what's more powerful when you have 2 days to train before the Mexico game? Is it tactical progression that you can do in those two days, or is it absolutely getting these guys on fire to come out on the pitch and play? Like, I think the mental side of it is huge in situations like this, particularly in international football, which is not as developed, not as tactically sound as the club game.
But if you're doing something about what's going to happen next, then you're going to you're going to take your eyes off the prize on the task that's immediately ahead. And that's beating a Mexico side who, by the way, have players playing across the world right now that are in very good form. A new manager. I think it's going to be a different kind of challenge against Mexico. So focus on them at this point. That's all I'm suggesting. And I'm sure that behind the scenes, that's exactly what's transpiring. This is a hype move. Like, and again, I have no problem with it, but I'm just calling it for what it is.
Well, we're drumming up the interest, and we have 17 days to hype Canada up for the semifinal against Mexico. And the USA and Panama will have already finished their match by the time Canada kicks off. So maybe then we can continue on the potential Canada-USA hype train. Has Jesse Marsch become the face of the Canadian men's national team?
No, he is not. He's neither a player nor is he Canadian. So that mantle will still reside, or that title will still reside with Alphonso Davies. But what he is he's the spokesman. That's part of his job. That's part of every national team manager's job. When for large stretches, I mean, we're going through a stretch of 3 months now where the team hasn't played. So this is how you stay busy. There's only so much scouting you can do. There's only so much planning you can do. That's why across Canada tour, like meeting with coaches and communities across this country, that's why that's a priority. Fundraising's a priority, galvanizing or making sure there's traction and interest heading into this tournament. And that's where Jesse Marsch is superb at. He's a really good manager, but he's also a very good salesman as well. When he speaks, you listen. He always has opinions. He has something to say. And right now, he is the biggest salesperson for this Canada program at this time. So let's leave things as they are. The players are the stars. They're the ones that are going to potentially shine the brightest at the World Cup. I don't know about you guys, but when people come up to talk to me about this team, they're all asking about the players on the field, not really the manager off it. That's just the way that things work. And I'm happy for it to stay that way, quite frankly.
Oliver Platt, when you think about the players, the elite Canadian players, they're off in Europe plying their trade, and a lot of them are doing a very good job of it. Of course, there's a healthy contingent of MLS and CPL players that are in the fold as well. But when you think of these superstars, they're not really here to go and sit down with the media and talk about this team because they're balling, as they should be, for their clubs. So as much as I agree with Gareth that yes, the fact that he's American, the fact that he's not playing, he is the representative of this team. Which side are you on here? Is Jesse Marsch the new face of the program? Or are you sticking with Gareth and saying it's Alphonso Davies?
I'm sticking with Gareth and the players on this one. I think spokesperson is a good word. That's the word I would have used. And I think that is different to a face. Like, as much as, yes, the players may be out of the country most of the time, when it matters at tournaments, they're going to be the ones wearing the Canadian jersey. And I think that's what matters above all when you talk about the faces of this team. Like, Jesse Marsch is obviously a very, as well as a very good coach, he's a very intelligent guy. Like, he's a Princeton educated coach. There's not that many of those in professional soccer. And he is very good at framing who this team is and what they kind of represent, as he did, I think, on that stage at that CONCACAF event, in a way that really motivates and galvanizes both the team but also the country. And I think that is going to be, an incredibly valuable resource for this federation and for this program to have as they come onto massive stages over the next couple of years. But like we've all grown up watching World Cups. Like some of my earliest memories are France 98. I remember Zidane and Ronaldo and Valderrama and Romania dyeing their hair, and I was terrified of Ariel Ortega and Beckham against Simeone. And like, if Aimé Jacquet walked past me in the street with respect, I'm not sure I'd recognize him, right? He was the World Cup winning coach with France at that tournament. It's about the players on the biggest international stages like the World Cup.
Now, Ollie, in this discussion with Christian Jack on the sit-down presented by Visa, there was a lot of ground that the two obviously covered. And at one point, Jesse Marsch was seemingly going through the laundry list of roles and responsibilities that he has with this team before rightfully shifting course, or maybe writing the course to say, dude, at the end of the day, this is all about the World Cup. And dude is a quotable item, by the way. Is that true, Ollie? Is it all about the World Cup? Is all of this hoopla and hurrah and excitement for nothing if Canada doesn't perform when they are hosting this sport's biggest tournament?
This is a tricky question, I think. Like, I'm somewhat going to sit on the fence here because I think the answer is yes and no. Like, I would like to say personally that the answer is no, in the sense that I care a lot about Nations League and Gold Cup and winning those tournaments, and I think that would be absolutely massive for Canadian soccer. I care about Jesse Marsch showing up at the Ontario Soccer Summit, where he did this interview with KJ and engaging, with people across the country. I care about the way that tournaments like this, and obviously the World Cup more than anything next year, is going to impact the entire Canadian landscape, the Canadian soccer landscape, the domestic leagues, semi-pro, youth levels, everything, and the things that maybe, in the past, Canada Soccer hasn't always done a brilliant job of engaging with, that hopefully is improving now in terms of their support of these types of things. So I would like to say no, but I also think like I'm in the Canadian soccer bubble. It's an expanding bubble. It's getting bigger and bigger, but it is still a little bit of a bubble. And there's going to be a lot of people outside of that bubble whose sole focus and attention is on the World Cup in 2026. And so from that perspective, I can understand why Jesse Marsch says that. And his answer to that question is oriented around that World Cup.
To Ollie's point, like, Ollie, you're part of the 1%. You're part of the 1% of the 1%.
I've always known he was a 1%er.
I'm sorry that bubble is very small. And even within that bubble, people that genuinely care about Canadian soccer, even people that are engaged in the sport on a day-to-day basis, they're still looking at the World Cup as the ultimate gauge on the way that things, the way that we judge things under Jesse Marsch. Look, there was another big personality manager of the Canadian men's national team who came before Jesse Marsch. His name was John Herdman, who had brought many of the very same feels to the equation. And what happened at the World Cup? I think a lot of people were disappointed in the way that the team played and the way that it inevitably ended. And that carried over. There was this hangover that they just couldn't shake off before John Herdman left the program. And we all know with Jesse Marsch, his contract runs through the World Cup. He could be gone. There could be new leadership at Canada Soccer. So this is what they will be judged based upon. It is a quote unquote home World Cup. There's going to be games played here in this country. This is where you're going to get the eyeballs. They need to produce at that time. You're right, Ollie. I mean, I care about the Nations League and the Gold Cup and all of those other things as well, but we aren't the masses, and that's who they want to appeal to in order to build this out and continue to grow the game in this country. It's all about the World Cup, and if they flop in 2026, that stink is going to be very hard to get off. So that's why everything needs to meticulously be built between now and then for the biggest payoff to potentially be rewarded at the end of that.